The information and services contained in this program are intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and are not intended as investment advice. Producers of this content are not responsible for the accuracy or validity of any information contained herein. Please consult your financial advisor prior to any investment decisions.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Sonnenfeld. I'm here with Talent DAO. In this short little bit of time, for those who are here in person and virtually, we're going to talk about like a bunch of stuff disrupting mainstream organizations, panning out not just from DAOs, and then a little bit of like, hey, what those mainstream orgs need to learn from DAOs, vice versa, and a few thoughts from here. I'm going to reintroduce myself a second time. I'm part of the Talent DAO team. There's a couple of us here, maybe even 3 or 4 that I've heard. And we're basically a community of organizational strategists, right, who've spent time looking inside organizations and are doing research on this emergent form. So check us out. Maybe we can help. Maybe you're part of us already. But super excited to be here today. And I'm just going to jump in. So if we look kind of big picture, there's a bunch of stuff that's disrupting mainstream organizations, not just DAOs. A first set of factors, actually, the source of disruptions, there's 11 things around this outside of this big oval. Things like public health. We'll hold there for a second. Things like public health, pandemic, right? Imagine wealth distribution, right? The way that wealth is structured in a society. These macro sources lead to where disruption comes from. They're not in any individuals or any DAO's control, sometimes even in any government or single society's control. But if we look to these kind of external places, then we pick our focus in the center. In this case, it's the organizations of the future, or mainstream organizations, even DAOs themselves, and we click 2 more times, click, click. Thanks. Lucy's amazing back there, by the way. So kudos to Lucy. There's a set of then trends that emerge in the center. Now trends are kind of signals over time that don't necessarily go away and together accrue to stuff to pay attention to. So there's shifts in who we as humans are, right? To speak about humans, when we connect, things like the fact that a retweet with anger is retweeted 17% more than without. So what does it mean to be in an influencer economy? The fact that we're in virtual and physical dwelling, right? Are companies or organizations moral actors in ways that churches or societies used to be? So what are new roles that organizations are playing in life? If we click again, I think there's also a set of shifts in how we process information. Are we collecting into mutualism, like the people in my DAO are my people? Or I'm going to send my kids to a COVID school with the one teacher who will hire, and we have a safety pod. Sorry, that's the case of mutualism, versus we as a society like take care of those in need, right? How do we pool together to make sure the greater needs are met? And how is that dynamic playing out in given contexts? That affects how organizations are as as technology upgrades, questions, are we downgrading humans in the process? Final set of thing at the bottom is there's a set of shifts in how resources are coming together to create business value. I'm going to point out in a moment where DAOs potentially fit into some of this. But like boundaries, are they porous, right? Can we have folks from DAOs anywhere in the world? Or like how do you handle crypto payroll when people are in different countries? Or can people actually travel across borders? We've both seen a real shift outward as well as a real hardening of certain things. I'm going to skip over for a second. Uberization of skills. I was just talking to somebody. On the one hand, the fact that you can get your radiology screen scanned across the world and also, get an Uber driver to take you across town, many, many, many more skills are available in this spot market framing. Does that mean that a DAO developer in Venezuela should be paid less than a DAO developer living in San Francisco? No, yes. Does it move everybody lower towards a lower mean? Question open. These kinds of things are affecting all mainstream organizations, and with the final click on this slide, I think there's a few of them highlighted in yellow that play into where DAOs are really on the edge of this space, right? What does it mean to work, play, and own together, right? What does it mean to be in a distributed and decentralized both decision-making and information space? If we continue on, you guys might know this quote. It's a favorite of mine from like the 1970s, but the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Now, if that's true, what it means is we can look to the now instead of having to wait. The what mainstream orgs need to learn from DAOs, related to the future comment, right, is that if indeed the future is here now, and if we in this room and in this conference and in this space and in this conversation are at the edge of the future, well, gosh darn it, the rest of the world should actually be looking to us to find out what's going on. So this is a little bit of a like Web 2, Web 1 perspective, but here's what my take is and what Talent DAO's take is on what mainstream organizations need to learn from us, right? I think the first is like flash mob start. Constitution DAO, 39 people, $4 million. Next day matched another 4 million, went viral, 17,000 people, 40 million. The folks here, actually they were sitting there before, they're not right there now, but who were at zero knowledge, right? What does it mean that the crypto whales knew how much money they had on chain? Nonetheless, all that happened really, really fast. So the ability for DAOs to essentially orchestrate a group of people extremely quickly in a digital flash mob with money, as Friends with Benefits founder says, that's really interesting. Mainstream organizations cannot do that right now, and it's worth paying attention to. The next one is, how do you organize work that is worthy of a bounty? Organizations increasingly, their ability to take pieces of work and take ways of creating that work as workers or bots or whatever, decompose it, put it back together to the thing that you want at the bottom, that is increasingly a capability that will differentiate organizations that succeed in an increasingly fluid marketplace. DAOs know how to do this, mainstream don't, or it's very hard. I think a third one is, what does it mean to actually have leadership in a decentralized world? I'll do a quick plug for tomorrow where there's folks talking about this again, and I'm going to skip the details of this. There's neat stuff about orbit, there's neat stuff about love and reach, there's really neat stuff about original research that Talent DAO is doing here. And as a final comment, multiple agencies. There's like whole fields in organizational studies looking at why, for example, you grant stock options to managers to have them act more like owners, let alone should employees get those things, and then what would it mean to be a co-op, for example. But in spaces like DAOs and other crypto spaces, you have, play to earn, learn to earn, management, ownership, governance, structures. All of these things are much more multiple than is typical in agency structures. So there's like neat, interesting stuff happening in that space. Who was it who spoke? I forget his name. The gentleman who spoke about adding the autonomous back in just now. King was his last name, I think. Anyway, so the gentleman who spoke just before us talked about how we're actually in a real experimental phase. If we do a click, right, this is classic technology theory. You have, fewer many competitors, and when you're early on, like you have lots of alternative designs. If you keep going, by the time you have a dominant design emerge, right? Are we going to go with Are we going to go with Betamax or VHS? Then you have something that really looks with a full supply chain, right? A full way of organizing things. However, DAOs are like not even anywhere near there, right? We're in total experimental phase, which on the one hand is exciting, and on the other hand means like we don't actually know where anything is going, and it's a neat time to pay a lot of attention to what are the parameters that we're engaging around. With the final few minutes, and I've lost the timing again, but I'll keep going. With the final few minutes, I think I want to also just share one perspective on what DAOs can learn from mainstream. We talked about what mainstream can learn from DAOs, but vice versa. First of all, and we'll talk about the star briefly, But first of all, like, organizations have existed forever, whether it's a family or a church or a guild or a voluntary association or a company or a nonprofit, or name your different LLC structure. Humans have done this for a long time. And there's things that we know about what governance is, like who is in charge, how are decisions being made, and how can we find out information. Right? There's stuff about reporting and transparency, classic things that we may rail against and yet also learn from. My specific field is in organizational design. It's basically a systems theory that says, like, yes, organizations can be designed to support an ultimate goal, even if that ultimate goal is the thing that's first coded before you then change it. Briefly, there's multiple elements of this star. If we go back for just a second. Things like strategy, structure, processes, rewards, and people. And I'm just going to read for a second. In February, I got a survey out from Dow Colony. And, they're like, gosh, full democratic decision-making is inefficient. Do you agree or not? That's a question of structure. Or crypto payroll is tricky, right? That's a question of people. Final one, my favorite. Key decision makers in crypto projects are not as well defined as their meat space counterparts. For example, CEO, director, chairman. Right? That's a question of structure and rewards. These are the kinds of questions that even if one organization or DAOs are struggling with, like, our field knows how to help think through these things. So I think in a final, quick closing, what I would say is that Talent DAO, first of all, we have tools, you can use them, they're open source. We have a whole health survey for anyone involved in your DAO if you want to kind of find out what questions are on their mind or sense the organizational health within the DAO. The survey's up on GitHub, there's a whole support community. Find Lisa's in the shirt, in the colors, that peach shirt. Find her and me, happy to talk about this and happy to help you bring this to your DAOs. It'll contribute to the research that we're actively doing in the community. And I think a second quite quick comment, and final with one more click, is come tomorrow, we're actually diving into leadership more specifically. And building on the leadership of giants tomorrow, same time. So quick pitch for that. We'd love to talk to you. And with that, I'll just say a huge thank you. If there's any questions, we can do a little chat back, or questions, or even things that it inspired as ideas.
Hey, thanks. What would you say is like the state of leadership in DAOs today?
Ooh, what is the state of leadership in DAOs today? Lisa. Yeah, come here. What? I'm getting somebody who knows this a little more than I, because she's got a great answer and I've got an okay answer.
Thanks, Sarah. So Sarah's really this expert in organizational development on how we structure things. But leadership's really looked at almost 3 different levels when you think about it as a system. There's the personal leadership. There's the team leadership, which people say culture lives and dies at the team level. And then there's the systematic, how your organization is structured, what that infrastructure is. And right now, the state of leadership in DAOs, first off, has a big cultural mindset shift that needs to take place in how we view all those 3 different levels of leadership in a way. And if you come and hear the talk tomorrow, you'll get much more in-depth insights on this. But basically, if I had to sum it up in 3 words, it's mojo over ego. And it matters, it matters. And you'll see this even in the evolution pre-DAOs of people going from the benefits at the top being things like having your name on a door, having the corner office, having the parking spot, to now being things like, can I travel internationally? Do I work with a global team? Do I have autonomy to choose when and where, and not just when and where, but who I work with and what I work on? And those are things that traditional organizations have had to try to back end into and haven't come up with satisfactory responses. DAOs have all the possibility to actually have this inherently in the structure. And yet, there's the promise of it, but then there's the reality of people working in DAOs. And we still have a long way to go. And that's really what Sarah was talking about with the nascent structures. So if we look at the 3 levels, I think we can get there.
Thank you, Lisa. Lisa, plug for Talent DAO and tomorrow, and thank you for your question. Happy to talk about it more. Stephen, do we want to ask another question? Well, thank you.
Was there
then.
one more question?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
No, he just.
Okay. Wait, on the mic.
Do you feel that there's a realistic transition between existing Fortune 500 companies and into a DAO structure? And if so, do you see that as a whole, as a part, and how would you imagine the structure if you had to place it to perfection as best you could in your mind?
Thanks for that question. It's an interesting one. Do I imagine Fortune 500 transitioning into a DAO structure? The simple answer for that is no, from my perspective. However, and I already have, and I tend to work a little more in that Web 2 space, right? I have plenty of clients who I'm talking to who are like saying like, how should we experiment? What should we be paying attention to? So I think that you're probably going to see pockets of much larger companies coming in and saying like, where can, for example, if we want to do the flash mob start, do we do that with a DAO? Do we partner? How do we play? So I think you'll see some experimentation and playing. I also think, right, even if you think about Axie Infinity, which got a lot of press and they got hacked or whatever, but they have a whole, as part of the stuff on their website of how they're going to transition even into a DO, right? Not even autonomous, but just a DO. And they have that plan from now until I think it was 2022 or 23. So you'll also see organizations as they're developing in their Web3 forms, decide which forms to take and how to move from one to the other. I think that's some of what I've seen, but very interested in what folks in this room are seeing as well. I think probably with that, Steve, are we?
We are fantastic.
Good. Thank you for the question. Thanks for the time. Glad to be here.